be a long session. What I'm planning to do is just give you a little bit of the history behind Duckworth Lewis, and then just a brief run through as to why it works the way it works. Not that I can profess to know exactly why it works the way it works, but I will answer any questions I can along the way. And then I'll just run into some examples and show you how the scorers will be doing it, because a lot of you are umpires and you need to have some oversight, because sometimes if somebody makes a small error, you should actually be able to spot it even without watching what goes on, if you kind of understand how the system works. And so it'd be a case of saying, you know, can you just go back and check that? So we shall proceed. So just what everybody wants is, you know, you turn up to a match and there's rain clouds overhead and we're all ready for showers throughout the day. So Duckworth Lewis was introduced in 1997 by Frank Duckworth and Tony Lewis, who's not Tony Lewis, the cricketer, but another boffin friend of Frank Duckworth. And when they introduced it in 1997, those of you old enough to remember log tables from school, they had a system whereby you had to sit down with your calculator, work out all the percentages, and then follow a log table to figure out what the scores should be. It was quite a complicated system. And they came over here and they actually ran a workshop in Clontarf and gave us all out our log tables to sit down and work out all the things. And we all looked at one another in consternation and went, how the hell is this going to work? But then it was adopted by the ICC in 1999 and quickly became computerized, which means that all of a sudden it was a very easy system to run. Once Frank and Tony had it up and running, they retired in 2014 and they passed it on to Stephen Stern, and he is now kind of the keeper of the system. And every ODI, every like international ODI and every all the T20s, etc., all the data from them is gathered and studied and inputted into the system. And when there's enough data to justify a change, then they bring out a new edition of the software. A new edition came out in October. It's DLS 5, and all clubs will need to make sure that they have DLS 5 for the start of the new season. So why do we have DLS? It's an attempt, I suppose, to set fair targets. Back prior to all of this, we used to have net run rate or just straightforward run rate. And it really didn't end up being fair because teams were constantly being disadvantaged by what was happening in the game. And so they decided to gather loads of statistics and to make it as fair as they possibly could, to set a target that would be the same difficulty as if there had never been an interruption. So it works on the basis that a batting team has two resources. They have all the balls that they're going to face and 10 wickets. So in this, I've said an ODI inning, so 300 balls and 10 wickets, or obviously be 120 in a T20 game. And as the innings progress, your resources are gradually depleting and they eventually reach zero when either you've played all 300 deliveries or you've lost all 10 wickets. When, due to any reason, the batting team loses overs, then they're denied the opportunity to make full use of their resources. And that's where Duckworth Lewis comes in. That's what it's doing. It's evening the scales so that both teams are getting an equal opportunity in terms of the use of their resources. And so targets are revised in a way that's proportional to the amount of resources available to each team at the time of the interruption. Okay. Sorry, this is all very wordy. We will move into other bits eventually. So the rate at which the resources deplete isn't uniform across the overs, because if you think of a 50-over match or a T20 game, they tend to start quite slowly and they build momentum as they go through the innings. And so they didn't just study the scores based on matches that they were getting information from. They were looking at the actual scores through the overs, looking at the first 10 overs, looking at power plays, looking at all the different parts of each innings and figuring out where the acceleration usually came from. And then they were doing the calculations based on that. So at any point, the resources lost due to an interruption depends on the number of overs lost, the stage of an innings when the overs are lost, and the wickets in hand at the time of the interruption. So if you have lost a lot of wickets, you've lost a lot of your resources, and so you'll be punished for that. But if you lose a lot of overs, you're having a lot of your resources taken away from you, so you'll be compensated for that. And so that's the way Duckworth Lewis works, basically. To run DLS, you need to have the correct version of the software. Peter, I know, has the download link, and if any of you need it, I'm sure he would happily send it on to you. I also have it if anybody wants to contact me for it. And you must also have Java on whatever device you're using to print your Duckworth Lewis, because it won't, and I keep calling it Duckworth Lewis, and I should be saying Duckworth Lewis Stern or DLS, but anyway, it was Duckworth Lewis for years. You need to have Java, otherwise it won't run. So when you open the device that you're doing it on, this is the screen that will come up for you. And you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, there are 3 different match types. There's the 50 over match with a minimum of 20 overs a side, T20s with a minimum 5 overs a side, and other match types. Traditionally, we would be using, or generally we'd be using, either the 50 overs or the T20s. If you have a 50 over match and it's delayed at the start and it ends up being a 40 over match, you still go into the 50 overs match button. You don't go into other match types. You stay with the 50 overs one, because that's what the competition is. It's a 50 overs competition. So your Duckworth Lewis is done based on 50 overs. Okay. Do stop me, folks, if you have questions anywhere along the line. Okay. Normally, when you're doing something like this, it's good to be able to go into the actual app, but the way it's set up, I would have to keep exiting Zoom to go into Duckworth Lewis and share that screen and then come back out of it and go back into Zoom and so on. And it's very time consuming. So that's why I've done it all as screenshots. Okay, so why do we need a printout before the game? Would somebody like to tell me that?
To make
check
sure
the
that
version.
Yeah, to check the version. That's the, and to make sure that both the laptop or the computer, whatever device is being used, and the printer are actually working. And when you, when the scorers are asked for a printout and they give it to the umpires need to check the bottom of the page. And very often people just take the page and they go, right, that's grand, printer is working. But what you need to do is look at the bottom of the page, and you'll see the 2 areas I've highlighted. You look here to make sure that it's DLS 5. That shows that they're using the correct version of the software. And then at this side, there will be the date of the match, because it will show that the sheet has been produced that day. And you usually want it printed at a time close to when you saw the scorers arrive at the ground, because what you don't want is some smart person printing off a Duckworth Lewis printout at home, bringing it in the morning to you, handing it to you, and you go, oh, that's grand, yeah, they've got everything working. And then it comes to the interval and suddenly, oh, there's no ink in the printer, or oh, sorry, we don't have a laptop, so and so forgot to bring it. So you make sure you get the printout and check that the right date is in the bottom right hand corner. Okay, the Duckworth Lewis sheets, when you get them, give you the par score. The par score is what would need to be achieved if a game was stopped at any stage for the teams to tie. The target score is the par score plus 1. The target score is the score that's required to win. But on your DLS sheet, when you get it, you're being given par scores. So remember, when you look at it, if as you go across and you're reading it, to get the actual target, you would need to add 1 onto the number. Okay. So losing overs in the later stage of an innings will impact a team more than losing the same number of overs early in the innings. Because if you think about it, with a team batting, and they lose 10 overs very early on in the game, they can recalibrate, get themselves organized, and treat it like a shorter match. But if you think you're going to have 50 overs and you suddenly lose 10 overs with 32 overs gone, suddenly you're into the last few overs of the game and you haven't had the chance to accelerate that you normally would. And so the later overs tend to be more productive, and therefore the team would have less opportunity to improve their target. And there's the example. A team with 6 down after 20 overs will have less to lose from a 10-over interruption than a team which is only 2 down at that stage. Because if you've already lost 6 wickets, there's every chance that you could be bowled out, or that you're going to have your lower order bats in there. So you're not going to be scoring as quickly as you would be if you had only 2 wickets down and your opening bat and your number 4 were actually in and batting. And so if you lose them early, it affects the team less if they've lost fewer wickets. So if we look here, I'm going to just run through a couple of examples of in a match if teams were at different places when the interruption came. So this first one here is a 50-over match. And in the first innings, when there were only 5.2 overs bowled, the score was 21 for no wicket and 10 overs were lost. And they went on to score 176. Okay, so you check, the first thing you would do is check that it says 50 overs at the start of the match. So that's fine. Team one's final score is in there. They lost 10 overs, but they lost it very early on. So therefore, they're not impacted that much by losing it. And so the target for the team batting second is slightly higher. It's higher by 5 runs because they know that they have 40 overs from the start, whereas this team thought that they had 50. Okay. However, if we go up, yeah, this is a par score table for that match. So let's just imagine that it pours rain after 23 overs. You go to 23 overs, and if the chasing team has 3 wickets down, then the par score would be 91. So their target would be 92. If the team had 5 wickets down, you go to underneath the 5, they would need to be, did I say 22 or 23 overs? 22 overs. They'd need to be 108 if they had 5 wickets down. So the winning score would be 109. Okay, so this is a par score table, and the target score is 1 more than that. These things are only relevant if there's no more play and you have to figure out who has won the game. Okay, but it does give the teams an idea of where they need to be if it looks like there's going to be rain. So, you know, they see big black clouds coming in and they're in the 21st over and they realize they've got 3 wickets down and they're on 74. They realize, gosh, you know, at the end of the next over, we need to be 88. We've got to get going here, but we better not lose any wickets, because if we lose a wicket, then we need to be 96. Okay, so it just gives captains an idea what they need to be aiming at the end of every over. So if we have an interruption later in that same innings, with still no wickets down, so instead of that interruption at 5.2 overs, let's imagine that the interruption came halfway through the innings at 25.2 overs. And the score now is 121, and they still haven't lost a wicket, and they lose 10 overs. At that stage, they are significantly disadvantaged, losing 10 overs when 25 are gone. And they haven't lost many of their resources. So therefore, you see the size of the jump in the target. That's because they have held on to their wickets and they're significantly disadvantaged by a fairly long or a fairly big chunk of their overs being taken away from them. And so therefore, the target for the team that knows that they've got 40 overs is much higher. Okay. What about if the same interruption happened late in the innings, but some wickets have fallen? So again, 25.2 overs. If you go back there, where they'd lost no wickets, the target was 203. So now let's have a look if they've lost 4 wickets. Suddenly the target is right back down almost to where it was at the start when the interruption happened earlier. So they only have to score 180. And the reason for that is because they have lost a chunk of their resources. So therefore they are being penalized for that. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Hi, Stella. Yes, I do have one question, or unless you're covering it later, there is a field at the bottom about penalty runs awarded to team 1 while team 2 are batting.
Yeah.
It seems
okay.
like the penalty runs get accounted separately and not as part of the total.
If you put it in, it will recalculate the target for you. So if you suddenly end up, you have your Duckworth Lewis sheets printed out, and suddenly there are penalty runs awarded to the team that that have already batted, the fielding team. Then if you go into your sheet, it will, if you add in the penalty runs down, sorry, my cursor keeps disappearing. You add the penalty runs in there and it will automatically adjust the target for you.
Okay.
And then you just adjust on the board.
So if team 1's final score was 176 and they got awarded 5 penalty runs during team 2's innings, we don't increase the 176 to 181. We instead add the 5 separately in the other box. Is that correct?
No, it'll automatically, it won't go and add them on there, but what it will do is it'll recalibrate what's needed here. And so they will have reached that. If they were 176 and they suddenly got 5 penalty runs, then they would have achieved the target.
Right. So
sorry,
in terms of the person,
these wouldn't have achieved the target. You know what I mean?
I'm sorry, Stella, this Anadeep here. I'm just wondering what Abhijit is asking is, or I might be wrong, but what my doubt over there is, let's say they scored 176 with penalty runs. So should we put it as 171 and 5 penalty runs below, or it's the total 176?
No. If there were penalty runs in the first innings, they're included in the first innings total, and so the full total is what goes up there as the team 1's final score.
So are we specifying that penalty runs in the below box or no? Then
no, we add the penalty runs there if they happen in the second innings and they're being awarded to the team that has already batted. So
okay,
if 5 penalty runs are being awarded over here to team 1.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem. If there's time at the end, I might go into it live and show it to you. But if not, when you get your Duckworth Lewis, go in with any match and put in your scores, and then add penalty runs down here in the box, and you'll see what happens. Okay. So why does the target for the team batting second sometimes reduce after an interruption in the first inning, even though both teams have the same number of overs? So let's say there's 50 over match and you lose 10 overs, and suddenly the team batting first scores 176 and the team batting second only has to get 170. Why does that happen? It'll happen if they've lost wickets, because if a team is losing wickets, they're going to be penalized in DLS for that. And so if you lose early wickets, a reduction in overs is actually beneficial to you. Because if a team is 80 for, I can't see what I have there, say 80 for 6 after 20 overs, they'll benefit from a reduced game. And if they finish on 140, DLS will readjust the 30 over target for the chasing team to 119. Because if they manage to get to 140, fair play to them. But because they had lost 6 early wickets, then they get penalized for that. And so the team batting second will end up having to chase a lower total if they both have the same number of overs. So that, here we go, because the team batting first had already lost a huge chunk of their batting resources before the interruption and probably would have been bowled out well before the 50 overs. but the chasing team have been denied the opportunity to bat up to 50 overs and chase a relatively low score. And so that's why the target is reduced. So because they took the wickets, they get the benefit. So common sense, if the batting team senses that rain is imminent, the smart thing is to keep wickets in hand because they'll maximize the benefits of DLS for your team. Okay. So let's look at a nightmare day for the umpires and scorers. One of those days where you're on and off. You have two captains in your ear all day long. Whether you're a scorer or an umpire going, what's the story now? How many overs have we lost? How many overs are we going to have? What's our total going to be? What do we need to do, etc. So let's run through an example. So here we have a game between Lightning and Thunder, and it's a 50 over match. And you arrive to the ground and it's rained overnight. And so the umpires decide, well, it's going to be a delayed start. So needless to say, the captains will be grumbling and moaning and giving out. So we'll take that as a given. And 7 overs are taken off. So it's been a lengthy delay if you think of your half-hour grace period and then 7 overs aside. A 43 over match starts and Lightning are 33 for 1 when the rain starts again after 8.1 overs. Play is suspended and 5 overs are lost. So if any of you have bits of paper and you want to jot down the various bits, you can, but Peter has said this will be available anyway. So if the scorers have a laptop handy, they can input straight away the first interruption, even though it's in the first innings and no calculations will be done at this stage. If you don't have a laptop open at that stage, you just take note of the time, the number of the score, the number of wickets down, and how many overs are lost. So here we have, it was already a 43 over match. So the first thing to check when you're putting it in is that you have reduced the 50 down to 43, the innings at the start of the match. Then this was our first interruption, 8.1 overs. The score was 33 for 1 and 5 overs are lost. And you'll notice there's nothing else there except for the fact that we know now that team 2 are only going to have 38 overs. It doesn't do any calculations because all the information isn't in yet. You can then just reduce down the screen, leave it running in the background and continue with the match. So play resumes after the short delay and it continues until 21.4 overs are bowled and there's another shower. By now the outfield is very wet, but covers go on quickly. Umpires decide to wait for a while because it's very wet underfoot and another 6 overs are lost. So at this stage, Lightning are 101 for 5. And thankfully that looks like the end of the rain for now. So second interruption goes in the first innings, 21.4 overs, score is 101 for 5, and another 6 overs are lost. So now we know that this team are going to have 32 overs to bat, and they will know that from the start. Okay, this team significantly disadvantaged by losing 11 overs, but they've lost a number of wickets. So how many overs remain in the Lightning innings? Was anyone paying attention?
32.
Okay. Let's have a look. 21.2 overs left. Okay. Play continues to tee and they finish on 156 for 7. It wasn't nice, sensible umpires that took tea early when it was raining before. So they've carried right onto the interval, 156 for 7. And then you have to do your DLS calculations. So what do you think the target might be? They have 32 overs to bat. And the first team has scored 156 for 7, bearing in mind that they lost 5 overs and then 6 overs. And there's the score they were on at the time of each one.
Around 200.
Okay, you think around 200? Anyone else?
No way to know, but I suspect because you've chosen some very specific numbers, the answer is 156.
Okay. This all came just out of the top of my head, Abhijit, so
Okay.
I'm not that organized. Okay, so let's have a look. Here we go. Very close. Because they've lost 11 overs, which is a significant amount, but there were 5 wickets down. They've lost half their wickets. So that's a lot of their percentage, while they still had whatever number of overs there, 22.2 overs left to bat, 21.2 overs left to bat. So they should have got a higher score than that, really, but with 5 wickets down, they wouldn't. So therefore, this team is only going to need 158 of their 32 overs, knowing from the start that they have 32 overs to bat. Or have they? Because just as you distribute the DLS sheets, the rain starts again, continues through to the end of the interval, and there's a further delay. Umpires inform you that another 6 overs have been lost. So now what happens?
You reduce the 38 to 32.
Okay, let's have a look. So it was at 32, and now we've lost another 6 overs. So now you're going into the second innings, and before a ball is bowled, so at 0.0 overs, when the score is 0 for 0, 6 overs are lost. And so the target now is 139. Okay, so it's approximately 5 and over. Yeah, a little bit over 5 and over required. And they have 26 overs to bat. 5, 6, or 30. 130. Yeah, about 5 and over. Okay. So Thunder begin their innings and they're flying at 58 for 2 after 11.1 overs when a brief flurry stops play again. Umpires inform the scorers that another 3 overs have been lost. So now what do the scorers do?
Enter the second interruption for the second inning.
And back they go. Now, bear in mind, when that previous interruption happened, they had to produce a new Duckworth Lewis sheet because the target had changed. Now, after just 11.1 overs, they're going to have to produce another DLS sheet because it's going to have to be recalculated. And so they put in this interruption, 11.1 overs, the score is 58 for 2, and another 3 overs are lost. And now the target is 126. Okay, now that's the target. The par score sheet that you give out will have 125 in the bottom right-hand corner, but the target is 126. So now they need 68 runs in 11.5 overs, so basically in 6 overs. Okay. New sheets distributed, the game restarts, blue sky has appeared, and we know what the target for the Thunder is. The match continues to its conclusion, and the Thunder score 129 for 4. What's the result of the match?
Thunder win by 6 wickets.
Go on. You must write Thunder win by 6 wickets DLS.
DLS.
Because it's an adjusted target for them. You must put in the DLS at the end of it. So target was 126. So team 2 win by 6 wickets DLS. Okay, you need to remember in any match that Duckworth Lewis is used in, the result must have DLS at the end of it to show that it was an adjusted target. Okay, another example. So a 20-over match. Rain after 7.2 overs, and the team is 51 for 1. So they're flying, and 10 overs are lost. The team scores 83 for 2. So that's a very big score, really, but a 10-over game. 83 for 2. So after 7.2 overs, They were going very well. And then they've suddenly lost 10 overs. So what do you think the target, if they scored 83, what will the target be for the team chasing? Is it going to go up or is it going to come down?
Will go up.
It will be
It has to
considerably
go up.
higher.
Yeah, it has to go up because they have really been disadvantaged by losing 10 overs. And they had only lost 1 wicket at the interruption. So they were 83 for 2. So we would go into our Duckworth Lewis and we go to the T20 box at the bottom, click on it, and it'll automatically put 20 overs in for the start of the match. They scored 83. And bearing in mind that it's a 10 over match now, team 2 are going to have to score 101 in their 10 overs because they know from the start that they have 10 overs to bat. Whereas this team, when they started, and for the first half of the match almost, they thought they were going to have 20 overs. So that's why there's such a big increase between the two.
Stella, one thing there, like then in that case, that will be an advantage for considering DLS, that will be advantage for team 1, right? Because they were not sure that like they are playing 20 overs.
Yes,
Or
because
they were, yeah.
they thought they were playing 20 overs and halfway through their innings, they were suddenly reduced down to 10 overs instead of the 20. And so that's why they get the benefit. And so team 2 has to score much higher.
Because they know that like this is the like these are the overs we are playing and this is the target.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. So a third example, a 50 over match, and the first innings is uninterrupted this time. And the team scores 232 for 5. The team batting second are on 110 for 4 after 21.1 overs, and 12 overs are lost. So they have been significantly disadvantaged by losing 12 overs, but they will be penalized because they've lost 4 wickets. So is the target going to be much higher, much lower, or about the same?
About the same, Stella, I reckon.
Yeah, okay, well, let's have a look. Hello, Paul. I didn't realize you
evening.
were with us.
It was a bit late.
So there we go, very close. Their target would be the original target was 233 to win. At the moment, because bear in mind, this isn't the end of the match, team 2 are behind by 2 runs because the par score at the moment is 112. Okay, so if the game finished now and they didn't get back out, then they would need to be on 233. Sorry, they would need to be on, par score is 112, they'd need to be on 113, okay? If they didn't get back out. And you would get that from looking at your Duckworth Lewis sheet that you've printed out. You would go across to where 4 wickets are down and see what the par score is and add 1 on. So at the moment, they're behind by 2 runs. Okay, where's that one from? Okay, so yeah, so the 12 overs were lost. So at now their target has been set at 207. Okay, it was 232 off 50 overs, but now it's down to 38 overs and the target is 207. Okay, so if you think 12 overs are gone and it has been reduced only by 25 runs, so it's only basically been reduced by 2 runs and over because they're being penalized having lost wickets. So they're going to need 97 in basically 17 overs. So they're going to have to go at it hard now, and they've lost wickets. So they're being penalized. Another example, a 50 over match. The first innings is uninterrupted and the team scores 232 for 5. The team batting second are on 147 for 4 after 21.1 overs, and play is abandoned. So Now we need our Duckworth Lewis sheet. Everybody is studying it all the time as it keeps raining. And eventually the umpires say that the game is abandoned and the teams will be looking to see where they need to be. Now, at this stage, this team at 21.1, they were 147 for 4. They are ahead by 35 runs at the moment when they came off for rain, because the teams will often say, what would the par score at the moment be? That would be on your sheet. If you ran a Duckworth Lewis sheet, that would have the par score for you, but it will just bring it up on the screen. You don't need to print it unless they're going back out. And then because the match is abandoned, there is a little place. Wait till I see, where is it? Here, you see there, note, enter A to abandon innings. So I have entered A, abandoned the innings, and there's the result of the match. So they've won by 35 runs. Okay, because the par score at the end of the game was 112. So you would write down the result of that match is team 2 win by 35 runs, DLS. If the match is abandoned, it's always by runs, DLS. Okay, because you're using the par score tables, and it's the difference between where they are and where they should be. That's the winning margin. So here they've won by 35 runs, even though they're on 147 and the others are on 232. Otherwise, you couldn't figure out a margin of victory. Okay, and if play is abandoned before the match reaches its conclusion, then the result is always won by X runs, DLS, whatever number of runs it is. And it's the difference between the par score and where they're actually at. And if the team batting second is 35 runs short of the par score, then team 1 win by 35 runs, DLS. Okay, and if they've reached it, or if they're well ahead of it, then team 2 will win by whatever number of runs they are ahead of the par score. Okay, so in the Women's World Cup, when Ireland went out just last week against India, and they lost a wicket in the very first ball, and then they lost Orla Prendergast also in the first over. Would the result against India have been different? India won on DLS. But would it have been different if Ireland had lost only 1 wicket instead of the 2 that they'd lost? It was something that, as I was preparing this, kind of crossed my mind, and I thought I'd have a quick look. So here we go. India scored 155 in their 20 overs. At the start of the innings, Ireland had 20 overs, so their target was 156 to win. They were 8.2 overs gone, and if they had only lost 1 wicket, they would still be behind by 1 run. So they would have lost by 1 run if they had only lost 1 wicket. As it happened, they'd lost 2 wickets and they lost by 5 runs. Okay, but it was one of those ones where everybody's going, oh God, if only we hadn't lost that wicket. And also, you know, the captains would have been looking and saying, we need to up the scoring rate because it looks like it's going to rain, but you always hope that you're going to get back out. So when it comes to Duckworth Lewis, what do you need to do? Whether you're an umpire or a scorer, you write down the score at every stoppage in play, the number of overs, the total score, the number of wickets, and the overs lost. And then you fill, if there are 2, 3, 4 interruptions, you fill each one in separately into your DLS calculator, and it will do all the work for you. And despite the fact that it's created by experts and it's based on years and years of statistical research, you'll still be asked, but why? Why is it that way? Why do they only have to get? Why do they not have to get this? What would have happened if? And so on. So no matter what you do, you're going to be on a loser with the team that's coming out on the wrong end of DLS and a winner on the team that's coming out on the right end. So before I stop sharing the screen, folks, does anybody have any questions that I may need to go back on?
Just one question, Stella, and I think I know the answer, but just want to be sure. There was an option for an over by over printout and a ball by ball printout.
Yeah,
presume
well
you
done.
really don't-
Yes, thank you. And I meant to include that in it. You always, in club matches, you do the over by over printout. If it's getting very tight and it looks like it might rain any minute and it might make a difference ball on ball, then you might want to do a very quick ball by ball printout. But generally for club cricket, I've never had to do it for club cricket. If you print out the ball by ball Duckworth Lewis, it takes for a 50 over match, it takes about 7 or 8 pages to do it. And it's an awful waste of paper. And usually teams just want to know where they need to be at the end of an over. And so if it gets very tight, what you can do is you can just have that would be in the last few overs. So there would only be a couple of overs to print off on the printout anyway. And so you could do it quite easily, or you could just bring it up on the screen and just let people know they need to be, if it comes down after the next ball, they're a run behind. If it comes down the ball after that, they're going to be 6 runs behind unless they, and so it will give you the information for ball by ball. In international matches, depending on the match referee, some match referees want both. Some match referees want just a ball by ball. Some match referees want just an over by over one. But generally you would be producing both for a match referee in an international match. But for club matches, it will be the over by over one.
And just out of curiosity, because I haven't seen a ball by ball printout, is it normally just equally divided among the 6 balls? Is it like, the difference between the over divided by 6 typically?
Yes, and so it goes, the way on the, hang on, let me go back to one of the sheets. There. Okay, so here you see where it says 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. It will go 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And so every ball, you will have 300 entries down this side for every ball in the over. And the score here would be whatever you need to be on each individual ball, depending on the number of wickets down. So each of those would be divided into 6 lines. Okay, so that's why it takes the 6 pages to do it, whereas you get 50 overs on 1 page normally. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, but I had a slightly different question though, which is, and this is not about how the printout looks, but if I was to look at the sheet, for example, and pick, let's say, 1 point over 20, so 20 overs bowled, 20 overs remaining, and let's say 4 wickets down.
Yeah.
Right, so it's 92, and then
Yeah.
if one more if one more over was to be bowled, then the par score is 94 for the same number of wickets lost.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just a difference of 2, so it really doesn't help. But does that mean that after 3 balls the difference would be 1, and then so 93 after 3 balls and the 94 after the next 3? Is it normally just equally divided among the 6 balls?
Yes, it would be fairly equally divided, but
Right.
the change will happen because the ball can't be divided into 6 bits.
Yeah.
And so the change will happen somewhere in the over. It might be on the second ball, it might be on it's easy there because
Right.
it's just 2 runs, but if it's 3 runs, then which ball does it
Right.
actually change on?
The rounding will differ. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. Anybody else?
Stella, I don't know. Do we need to do it? Do we need to create a DLS match report?
Oh, well, now I actually didn't include that in this. So let me think. Do I have? I actually don't have one on this laptop, Peter. That's a good suggestion. Do you by any chance have one that you can
Yeah, I'll have to
put
fling it
up on your screen?
Yeah, just give us a second.
Hang on, I'll stop sharing and you can bring one up on yours.
Yeah.
Stella, William here.
Yeah.
Just while Peter's looking at getting that up on screen, I'm just wondering if you possibly have another example there from that would take into account the situation from the South Africa-Zimbabwe game in the T20 World Cup.
Okay, do you have the scores, Willie?
I don't have them unfortunately in front of me, but essentially what happened was it was reduced at the start. Zimbabwe
Yeah.
batted, scored 90 odd, I think, off about 13 overs.
Yeah,
South Africa came at the bat and got off to a flyer. I think this is a kind of a much more maybe for our umpiring side of things and managing things like this. South Africa got off to a flyer and were about 50 odd off three and a bit overs, 4 overs. And
yeah,
it rained. Okay.
yeah,
I think there was a previous reduction as well, but essentially they never got to the 5 overs required for a match. But
yeah,
South Africa were miles ahead on DLS.
yeah. Doesn't
So
matter.
so just from an umpiring point of view that people probably need to realize, in that situation, because it rained and there was no chance of play, the game was abandoned with no result.
Correct.
Right. However, there's a slight, for want of a better word, quirk in all of this. If the conditions had have improved to the situation where the umpires thought they could get in the remaining 1.3 overs or wherever it was, they actually didn't need to go back onto the field, because once they said that play could restart and the conditions at the time of the restart time were suitable, they didn't need to restart the game because
They had
the
already
game-
reached the
the
5
game had
over
already
target.
reached its conclusion. Now, it's unlikely we're going to have this in a scenario like this in Leinster cricket or in the pro, wherever you hope.
We have actually had it, Willie. I've had it twice,
Oh, lovely.
where a team has actually exceeded the DL target, but not got to the right number of overs. Now I haven't had it where they opted to not to go back out, because it never reached the stage where they could get back out, but they were aware of the fact that if conditions had improved, that they would have, they didn't even really need to go back out because they had already reached the target.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point for us as umpires. The whole session on the DLS was this has been really good and sets out everything for us. But for those umpires, when it comes to if we ever get into that scenario, it's just to be aware that there is a scenario where you may, when you get to a stage, you say, oh, the conditions are okay for us to restart, that you actually don't need to restart because the game is already over.
Yeah, because you've already reached the target.
Yeah.
But it tends to create, it would create at club level an awful lot of consternation as to what would the pressure on the umpires would be phenomenal, because deciding on whether or not the ground is playable when a team has already got there and doesn't need to go back out, it would be a very contentious one, very difficult. So I imagine
it would require a huge amount of man management. And
absolutely.
as an experienced umpire, I would say the best way to make that decision is just as you're getting out the car park gate and shouting back.
Well, funnily enough, I was going to say I would be inclined to phone them later and say you could have done that.
Yeah.
You know?
Indeed. There we go.
Thank you, Willie. Yeah,
Thanks,
well
Stella.
done.
Okay.
Any
so-
look, Peter?
Yeah. So I can share both of these. Share. So so you have to put in the A. Can you see everyone see this?
Yeah.
So we have 100.
Yep.
And you put in, then you press abandoned. It only goes in for the abandoned, and you create that. Put in the name of the competition, the home team, the away team, where the venue was, what date it was, who batted first. It'll give you the option who batted first. Press OK. And it'll give you then this report, and then you put the scorer's name, details, and any comments, and you email the report.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. I thought you meant the one that they use at the Interpro matches, the paper version.
No,
I
sorry.
didn't realize you meant the one from the DLS itself.
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies. Yeah, I could have shown them that. All right. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody have any further questions? I'd be very impressed if I have this all done in under an hour. Paul has. Go, Paul.
No, I was just gonna not quite. Just you may have covered it at the beginning. I missed the very start, Stella, but sun splitting the stones, 26 degrees, and everyone's always saying, umpires and scorers and everybody else, oh, do we need to bother today with Duckworth Lewis? But I'd always say there's lots of different ways a match can be abandoned. A swarm of bees could fly over, someone can get badly injured. I don't know, let your imagination run riot, but it's not just rain that needs Duckworth Lewis, so I'd always be prepared.
Yeah,
sorry, Stella, you might disagree, Stella, but my personal approach is if it was that and the sun was splitting the stones and we go in the second innings, I might say to the scorer, whoever's doing the printouts, yeah, just do one so we have it. Maybe don't do 4 or 5, but I'd always get one at least.
Yeah, and I think, it does make a lot of sense. And I had said at the start, Paul, before everyone came in, to make sure that, it seems like fussing to ask for the printout before the game. But that printout before the game is very important as well, to check the things at the bottom of the sheet and so on. But you're right, any sort of unforeseen circumstance can happen that can have a match abandoned. And DLS we always think of as being just to do with rain, but it isn't necessarily always just to do with rain. What if you suddenly have to evacuate? That's having hosted a World Cup match where we got a bomb threat in the middle of it. That's something that could very easily have happened. So, yeah. Anybody else? Okay, Peter, the stage is yours.